Well, if we take it back a bit, I believe it was the 1988 Olympic Games when we saw Ben Johnson run a 9.86 World Championship 100-meter run, and I think it was Seoul, Korea. I think it was when he failed the drug test after winning that gold medal, and was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. It said banned, and he pretty much wore the scarlet letter for failing a drug test. And Carl Lewis was kind of like the darling afterwards by default, even though he didn't beat Ben Johnson. But later we come to find out that Carl Lewis tested dirty 5 or 6 different times. The whole steroid movement began. It got a groundswell. The WWE started testing for it with Vince McMahon. We started having the baseball players and the football players were getting all huge. And I think there was something going on with some government regulations, and they wanted to stamp out the steroid use. Well, lo and behold, it came into the bodybuilding industry. And in 1990, the very first ever drug-tested bodybuilding show would take place at the Arnold Classic, which actually happens this Saturday night in Columbus, Ohio. This would have been 31 years ago in 1990, that I went into that drug-tested competition after winning the Pro Ironman here in Redondo Beach 2 weeks prior. That would qualify me for the 1990 Mr. Olympia. 2 weeks later, I'd go to the Arnold Classic in Columbus, Ohio, and win with perfect scores and walk off with the biggest purse of $60,000 at the time presented to me by Arnold Schwarzenegger himself. Then I'd go on tour for 2 weeks over to Toronto, Canada. While I was in Toronto, Canada, I received the phone call that I failed the steroid test, tested positive. And that being said, they held on to all the prize money until the test results came in, so I didn't have the $60,000. But what I did have was the Arnold Classic trophy, second one of its kind. It started in 1989. Rich Gaspari won the first one, walked off with $55,000, and there I was, 24 years old, the new darling of bodybuilding, planning on buying a house and had big dreams and big goals at 24 years old. And I was told I wasn't going to get the check, but I would have to return the trophy, which meant I would have to go to my mom's house, take it from her mantle off the fireplace, drive it down to Gold's Gym, and leave it in Gold's Gym, Venice Beach, where they would then deliver it to Mike Ashley, who was called The Natural in Arizona. And Mike Ashley had portrayed himself as a lifelong natural bodybuilder, so stood to reason that when he got second place to me, by my default, that he would be elevated to the champion. So while I'm on tour, I don't know really what's going to happen. I don't know, is this the end for me? I failed the drug test, right? But this is an age of no digital communication. That information did not hit the public newsstands until around the month of May or June. And by that time, I had already continued on training. I'd met with Joe Weider. I was already qualified for the Mr. Olympia, and all he could say is, you're qualified for the Olympia. Don't make that mistake again. Otherwise, it's curtains. The Mr. Olympia was going to be drug tested. Just so happens in 1990 in Chicago, September, it was also where Vince McMahon launched his brand new WBF Bodybuilding Federation and walked off with 13 IFBB pros, one of which was Barry DeMay from the Netherlands, Gary Stridham, Aaron Baker, Mike Quinn, Jim Quinn, Mike Christian, David Dirth, Danny Padilla, Tony Pearson, and my former training partner, Troy Zucolato. They all left to the WBF for guaranteed contracts while the Mr. Olympia was taking place in 1990. And I'm there. And this time they get it backwards. They do the drug testing on Friday, and they get the drug test back on Friday. So the only way to get on the stage is if you pass the test. I happened to pass the test. And, of course, going on to that competition the following night, I wound up going from 13th place in 1988 all the way up to 3rd place in my second Mr. Olympia. I got to keep the prize money. And the only way I felt I could redeem myself after passing that test and getting the prize money was to go back to Columbus, Ohio. So in 1991, I went back to Columbus, Ohio, increased the prize money to $70,000. And at 25 years old, I duplicated the feat of winning in 1990, kept the $70,000, got the Arnold Classic trophy, which is right here over my head. I'm going to show you real quick. I don't know if you can see it. You see that? Can you see the trophy? That's from 1991. Yeah. That's the 1991 Arnold Classic trophy. And I redeemed myself because at that point in time, they got rid of all the steroid testing. Lo and behold, what happened? In 1 year, They threw all the drug tests out. I'll tell you why. In 1990, when I failed the test, there were 6 other bodybuilders that failed the test. At the Mr. Olympia, there were 6 other bodybuilders that failed the test. If they were going to continue doing what they were trying to do in the sport of bodybuilding, they were ultimately going to wind up with no bodybuilders. Yep. Because there's different functions. When you say the word steroids, everybody thinks a needle and a syringe. But if you think of steroids the way you think of automobiles, you will now know that there is a whole range of choices, just like there are with cars.
Shawn, Shawn, you know me. I'm obnoxious. I'm the interrupter, and I'm going to do it. I'm digging in, and I'm going to go another direction, man. I'm sorry. You said, let's save the education on anabolics for another time, and I would love that.
Okay.
I want to ask you this. You said you needed to redeem yourself.
Yes.
What does that mean? Now, you got caught. I get it. You redeemed yourself because you came back and won the next year, but what was happening in your brain and in your heart when you had to go into your mother's home and take that trophy off the mat? I want to know how you felt and how you dealt with that.
Yeah, it was a hard one because my mom didn't know what steroids were. She didn't know what the whole thing was. She was more concerned about the fact that she had gone house shopping with me. I knew I was going to win the contest. She was there 2 weeks prior when I won at the Ironman, and we were going to pretty much duplicate what happened in Redondo Beach in Ohio against pretty much the same lineup with a few different people thrown in. But I was confident I was going to win, and so was she. And by not being able to keep that prize money, I wasn't able to buy the house that I was trying to buy. I was planning on it. My mom had gone to help pick it out with me. So that's the thing called counting your chickens before they hatch. And so my redemption came from the fact that Joe Weider was very understanding, reminding me that I was still qualified for the Mr. Olympia, and I still had an opportunity to pass a drug test. It wasn't like I felt like I was Ben Johnson of bodybuilding, but I also know in my psyche that almost everyone else was doing it. I didn't justify my use of that, but it's the sport of bodybuilding. And there are things that you can do that you get on at a certain time and you get off at a certain time. There's water-based anabolics. I was just trying to say, Rick, in talking about anabolics, there's so many different varieties that they don't just come in a needle and a syringe. And it's not just for the advantage of being big, because again, I was one of the smaller guys. There's things that you use for recovery, things that you use for hardness, things that you use for definition and muscle retention. But it was a long walk into my mom's house, to that fireplace, explaining to her that I was a loser, feeling like a loser. And mind you, I was the only one that could deliver that trophy to Gold's Gym, a place I was celebrated, and a place that I trained regularly, and a place that they did not know what the hell I was doing. The gym manager knew. But when I brought the trophy in and sat it down, most people thought I was showing it off for a little while because it sat there for about a week. And I was there, in and out of the gym. There was the Arnold Classic trophy in the Gold's Gym. When you check in to register, you can see the trophy. And then it was gone. And I have to come in there, and I've got to explain to people because it's not circulating at the rate that we communicate today. Yeah. The only way you know is if you called Gold's Gym for the results, or if somebody told you, and it was snail mail. So half the people thought I was still the Arnold Classic champion.
I know this is Rick's kind of spot, but my view is how that make you feel. Like, did you go into depression, or how did you cope that? Because me, I'd been curled up in the bed for a month. I wouldn't have wanted to go nowhere. I'll be honest with you.
I got to tell you, Butterbean,
how did you cope with that?
There was no depression. There was getting right back to work. I had a tour that I had already arranged prior to the Arnold Classic that was taking me around the world up until September, almost August, I should say. So I think because I was busy and I was pre-booked and I was coming off that Arnold Classic and I was getting the affirmation from people as I was doing my seminars and appearances saying it was all bullshit, right? Like they didn't make me feel maybe like Ben Johnson felt, because I think people just kind of understand the dynamics of bodybuilding. It's a very forgiving sport if you're a bodybuilder. A lot of bodybuilders were doing what I was doing, and before the grace of God, some of us may not have to experience the steroid test, but there's a lot of bodybuilders that had been using it. And I don't think any of us looked at it as something that was like cocaine or freaking, crack. So it was kind of more of an acceptable drug in the 90s. And having to explain to my mom that I would be back and that I would redeem myself was tougher to actually make myself believe and actually do. So when I moved into third place in the Olympia, and I passed the drug test, and we knew that Friday night, and I was able to call my mom and say I passed the test. Now she says go out and win it. Well, I'm going up against a 6-time Mr. Olympia, Lee Haney. It's easier said than done. I got Lee Labrada in the show. I got Rich Gaspari. I can't just go out and win the Olympia. It would be nice, but I'm going out there trying to win this thing drug-free. I mean, in my mind, I'm going up Mount Everest, and I don't know what these guys are going to look like, but I do know the bigger bodybuilders were not going to be as impressive drug-free. So in my mind, I thought, this is going to favor me going into this show because they're all going to be a lot smaller than they normally would. And I'm already small anyways, and I'm not going to be that much smaller than I was. And lo and behold, I got third place, and I was celebrated. So, Eric, before depression could set in, I got the affirmation from Joe Weider. My training partners were pushing me even harder, and I had the belief that I could actually win the 1990 Mr. Olympia. By getting third place for me, that was as best I could ever do. I sailed into the 91 Arnold Classic Championships, got the $70,000 check, bought the house, and I got the trophy. I took it from my mom. I said, you're not getting this one. This one's mine.
Thank you, man.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Support us on patreon.com for $1.99 a month to watch our full shoot interviews ad-free and help our channel grow. Follow us on Twitter at the Hannibal TV for instant updates.